Hi, I'm Dean. In this video, we're going to be going through the full-length tutorial of how I actually built this basic application that uses action cable. So we're not using authorization or authentication. We're just creating action cable rooms that you can go to privately. So hopefully this is maybe what you need to complete your project. There'll be different parts coming out in the future where I host it to Heroku and show you the steps that goes into that. But until then, I hope you enjoy.
So first of all, we'll generate the project. This is recording. Cool. So Rails new. I'll just call it chat room. Okay, I think that's good enough. Whilst that's cooking, I'm going to create a repository chat room. It's available. Good. And this is our basic application. In order to get it running for the first time, obviously, I have to create the database. On this version of Rails, for me, it automatically puts Postgres as the development database. It never used to do that. It used to be, I think it was SQLite, but now it's... Okay, I actually didn't start the database though. But now it's pretty good like this. It's going to request a migration, isn't it? No? What does that all say? Nothing bad. So my server is running in this other tab, so that's all we have to take note of. I'll actually stop that for now because we're not going to do anything on it just yet. So the first step to setting up this action cable multi-room project is to create the basic functionality. So you want multiple rooms and you want different sort of chat objects which can be created and belong to each room. So you go to a room and it has its associated chat messages. Anybody will be able to create it for now, so there'll be no user tied to it. But you can create a chat object that spawns on a room and displays on a room. So to do that, the first thing I'll create is the room. So to do that, Rails G scaffold room, and a room will have a name which will be of type string, and it will have, let's even say just a subject of the room or a topic of the room, which will also be of type string. That generates a whole bunch of stuff, and if we were to migrate right now, you'd have it, but I'll do my migration separately just to avoid any mistakes like last time. So as you can see in my schema, it's created a table called rooms, so a rooms contains the model room, and if we go Rails db migrate, whoops, misspelled Rails, there it is. Then I can open up the server and we can have a look at what we've got immediately. So it automatically routes rooms to the index. So this is the power of using scaffold. We already have full CRUD functionality with the database. We can create rooms with names and topics, and we can go back and we can see all of this was created. Now it's put some styling on us by default here. I'm going to leave that because it's going to look a hell of a lot better than nothing, but I'm not going to focus any more on styling. So this is going to be like a real HTML-y looking website. But yeah, this is kind of cool that we've already got this running. The next thing is to give each room a message. To do that, I'm going to use something a little bit interesting. Or I'm going to take a different approach to doing it. It's because I'm lazy. And I'm going to create a scaffold for each message. So we're going to go Rails G scaffold message. Each message will need content, which will be of type text. So that holds more than just, I forget, but text can hold more string than string can, basically. So it's going to have content. It's also going to reference a room. So room references. So it has content and it references a room. I'll check a different project I've got just to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. So I've got another project open. I can just check, where is this schema at? Database schema. Okay. Yep, so we don't have users yet, so that's all. So I'll generate that. And now we've done pretty much the same thing, but just with a message. So the room and message is pretty much the same thing now, except it references room, and the other one references nothing. But otherwise, they're both scaffolds. And this only contains content. So from here, I'm going to Rails db migrate again, and we'll just take a quick look at the schema. If we look at the schema, it references room ID, perfect. So that was actually the error I made on the last attempt I made. I must have typed rooms references and it put rooms ID here, and it was just too much of a kerfuffle to fix. So I just restarted it. And it's got the content in form of text. That's perfect. For now, we're not going to put any validation on it. That's good enough. One thing we'll have to change real quick is if we go to our app models, we'll have to tell the room that it has many messages. We'll have to do that manually because we created message after room. So now that's done, we'll just do a quick commit. Oops. Created room and message model. So right now what we've got is, if we open the server again, we've got two separate resources or two separate things. We've got rooms and we've got messages. When you create a message, you can manually input a room here, and you can actually create a message that's associated to a room just through this form here. But we don't want that. What we would prefer is if you could go into a room. So you can go into a rooms show, so rooms 1, which is the default routing for the show of a room. And you would want to be able to see the messages associated with the room here. So we'll do that very first of all. The reason we generated the scaffold is because this just simplifies it, right? We can go to our app, we can go to our controllers, we can go to our messages controller, and look at how it indexes the messages. It goes messages, message all. Well, we just need messages, right? We can go to our rooms controller, show, and we can, now you have to know a few things about Rails to keep up with me, but Rails has a before action called setRoom, and setRoom, what it does is it creates this room class object for us already. So we already know what room we're on. We've already got access to room here because within the show index, within the show action, we have access to room because we're running this method. So we already have access to room, but we can also say room.messages. So this is a shortcut in Rails. I'm not sure if you call it a helper function, but it's a shortcut. And so we have access to all the messages in room, just like that. So we can refresh, and that lets us know that at least our syntax is working. Next step is we can go to the views, messages, index, and we can look at how it styles the indexing of messages. So I say, why not just take this? Actually, I'll take everything here. Copy that and put that in the rooms show. So I'll put that below the topic of the room, like that. Refresh, and there we go. Messages, content room. What's printing content room? Content room. Okay, so that's just the headers of the table. So now to test that this works, we can go to messages, create or new. Hello there. And the room ID would be 1. Okay, we go back. This is the messages index, but if we actually go to the rooms show, so rooms show 1. Oops, what did I do? Not edit. There we go. The messages actually display here in this format. To save us some time later, I'm going to get rid of this table setup, but it still saves us time having copied that. So I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff. I have it prettier on here, I think, but I'm not sure if it's working. I don't want links to destroy and all of that. But for now, I'll leave that. Alt click so that I can delete 3 things at once. Should have done more. And alt click here. I wonder if I can just shift delete. No. Shift delete. Alt delete. Control delete. No. You can too. But, alright. There we go. So this is now formatted differently. So now it's just hello there, and it shows the room ID. I don't want that to be shown. And let's put like a huge, can we put like a tab between that? I forget how you put a tab. Alright, you know what? I'll just put a few lines. I want to keep this quick. There we go. So the message displays in the room index. So that's pretty good right there. We'll do a quick save. Okay, created room displays associated messages. Okay, rerun the server. Now the next step that we want to sort of get to is we want to be able to have the form in the room. So we want to be able to create a message from this room. Okay, so to do that, again, this is why we did it via scaffolding, because all of this has already been done. We can go to our controllers, message controllers. What does it need for new message? It needs message equals new. So we'll need to put this within the show controller. Okay. We won't have to touch this controller again right now. The create, so this controller within messages allows certain parameters in, and it allows a room ID and a content ID. So we need to put the room ID in via a form from this room. They've already created the form within their views. So that's, if we go to their new form, so it's just in form right here. Okay, so I can grab this entire form, copy it, and I can paste it into the show. I'll put it above the index of all messages, and you'll be able to see. Whoops. What have I done here? If this is within messages, my mistake. Close that down, go to rooms, show. So above the messages here. Okay, so it's having difficulty with that straight up. Did I copy the model? I must have done things in the exact opposite order. So what I really wanted to do was go to the messages form, grab this, and paste this into the show form of room. And I'll actually put it in here underneath messages. And I'll just tab it just to, no, I won't. I'll fix the tabbing up on this. And let's see if that works. Okay, at least it's the correct error now. So now it's having difficulty with this model thing. We can simply see wherever it's written model or message, put an @ sign in front of it. It'll know automatically that we're talking about this instance, and the functionality will all be the same. So if I save now, refresh, there we go. So now I have a room where I can go, well, hello. Enter in the room ID of 1. Creates, I can go back. We're actually in the messages index right now. So that's not where we want to redirect to. To change how we redirect, we can simply go to our controller for rooms, for messages, and we go to our create controller. It says here redirect to message. This automatically redirects to the message in the index or the show, but under the messages controller. Hopefully I didn't confuse anyone there. What you actually want to do is go to the room. So I can go room.find message.roomID. And I can do the same here. So this is automatically going to the show action within this controller. No, it's this one here. Okay, so basically when something screws up, it's going to try and redirect. I'll fix that later, but for now, let's just try that again, because I want to demonstrate that that's fixed. Now, something didn't create there. Oh, they did create. They just put side by side. So there you go. It's working, and we got redirected to this page. So obviously, that's a quick defect that we can fix. Make sure that we're in the correct rooms show. When we're doing this, we want to put some sort of break in between these. And there we go. So now the functionality is working. The last thing I'll change before I do another git commit is this room field. There's no reason that I should have to enter 1 every time. So the trick I'm going to use for that is a hidden field, just so that there's less backend screwing around. That's something I can quickly do here. And the way I can do that is just go to this field here. You don't even need the field tags around it because it's going to be hidden. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go hidden field. Is that how I do that? Let me just quickly check my my other application because it's not highlighting, so maybe I've done something wrong. Rooms. Oh, I think I've done it correctly. Hidden field. Have I just misspelt field? Form.hidden field. Oh, it's because of that. Room ID is the parameter that I want to change, and then I just put in the value. So that's literally value and then the room ID. Now the room ID can always be found from the params. So I can go params ID. So on a corresponding page, just to demonstrate what that's actually referring to, params, we're looking at these params here. Right now there's only one, and that's going to default to ID. It defaults to ID because if I quickly go like this, Rails routes room, G is for grep, we can see that within rooms, where's the rooms show? There we go. Within the rooms show get request, the param is ID, follows the colon. So that's how we knew that we had to use params ID. That's the default for Rails anyway. Okay. Restart that server. Okay. Now we have a hidden field with the value that we want. If I refresh this, we no longer have that field there. And hi. There we go. It's going to the bottom. Does that make sense, having the chat box at the top if the latest message is at the bottom? Maybe not, so I'll change this order around and I'll put it at the bottom. Which is sort of how modern messaging systems do it anyway. You have the actual input at the bottom. Where is it saying content? Saying content somewhere. I don't like that. Message. No, like this content. It's above the form input. It's the label, isn't it? Alright, I just need some breaks in between that is all. It's a bit confusing. Okay. There we go. So again, this is just using the default scaffolding CSS here. Scaffold CSS. That is all, and as far as I'm going to go with that, because I don't see a need to get any more detailed. All right. So git add, git commit, room, or what should I say? Created basic room messaging system, and I have. Quick trick: if you're on VS Code, you can use these little minus symbols here. You can close all the folder structure, and you can close all your tabs. It's just a handy tip. But that's what we've created, you know? If I just start the server, if you go to it, Okay, you have a list or an index of rooms that you can go to. So you can create a different room. And the rooms are isolated, so you don't see messages from one room in another room, is the point. So they're isolated, and that's essentially a private chat room, therefore. Okay, the next step is to get rid of some of the redundant functionality that came with the messages scaffold. This is a quick step, so I won't talk too much through it, but you'll see what I'm doing. Okay, so I was going to delete all the unnecessary methods or actions from this room, but I thought differently of it because maybe you copy this repo out of the box and you want to use them. So I'm going to leave them here. What I am going to change is the routing. So if we go to configure out, go to messages, I'm going to go only. The only one that I actually want to use by default is the create route. Everything else from messages I want to be illegal. So if I go messages, new, that shouldn't work. If I go messages, that shouldn't work. The only one that I actually want to be able to use is messages create, and that's a post request. So that's what we're going to be doing from now on. And I think I'll just leave it pretty much at that. I won't even delete the views if you want to use them or do something different with them. That's up to you. Okay. So we're pretty much ready to get on to the next step with the use of action cable. So this is kind of cool. And this is where a lot of the work actually goes into getting this configured. So action cable has JavaScript parts, but it also has Rails parts. So we're going to configure all the Rails parts first and then the JavaScript parts. So the very first thing that we're going to create is we're going to go here, we're going to close down the server, and we're going to go Rails G channel. So this is again like the quickest, shortest way of getting it done. And we're going to just call it a room channel. Okay. What does that create for us? Because I know, there might be a lot of you who haven't used that before. It created something in JavaScript. It also created something in the channels. What would you call that? Directory. Just below assets. And you can see it's created a subscribe method and unsubscribe method. It's also created a channels under the JavaScript. So same name, channels, but under JavaScript. And it's created a room channel. Connected, disconnected, received. I'll go into a very in-depth explanation after this as to actually what's happening, but for now, we're just going to go through the configuration and get this working. There is one thing that I'm going to do right before I begin, and I will explain right now as it pertains to implementing action cable, and something that I've found to just be so much easier. If you're using TurboLinks, TurboLinks has something to do with making navigation faster, and it does this through making certain JavaScript reloads redundant. I am going to turn it off by commenting it out in my bundle, my gem file. I'm going to re-bundle things, and then I'm going to pretty much remove any instance of the word turbo links in my project. So I can go to this big search button, turbo links, anywhere that it's being used. So it's in my package JSON, so I can get rid of that with yarn remove turbo links, I think is how you do it. There we go, removing turbo links. So now that should no longer be, I researched that. Yep, it's no longer in that .lock file, application.js. So here we go. I didn't disconnect my thing. Okay, cool. Turbolink start, get rid of that. Turbolinks, get rid of it. My HTML, here we go. These can stay. Now, if you know a workaround for that and you want to implement it, I'll leave that there for you. But what Turbolinks basically does, in the most basic sense, is it stops the JavaScript from refreshing on each page, and I think it only updates a certain part of it. That's not what we want to do, because what I found is when you change pages, so like when you navigate through pages, you go from one room to the other, it doesn't actually re-render or reload this stuff here. There are workarounds that you can do, but for the simplest possible demonstration, just take off Turbolinks and let me demonstrate to you that doesn't change performance at all on an application of this size. And even if we put it online, it's not going to be a huge deal. So as long as I haven't got any errors, all you can do now is when you reload it, that's got nothing to do with what I just did it? Show message. What's going on there? Okay. Show message. Okay, so the error there is obviously we deleted a whole bunch of these paths. I just commented them out or got rid of them in the config routes. So that's why the show, the edit, and the destroy method are no longer available, which is fine because we don't want them anyway. So I just forgot to get rid of that. And to do that, we just go to our views. Where is that? Sometimes I just gotta put my glasses on. So I'm kind of having to squint here. Okay. So if I go to app, views, I go to messages, rooms, show, and it's simply going here, getting rid of all these. Won't need that anymore, and bang, there you go. Cool. So now it really is working, and we've turned Turbolinks off. So git commit. We'll push it as well. We haven't pushed in a while. Cool. So let's get into configuring Action Cable now. So we have our basic room set up. We can create messages in this room. Rooms are isolated. So if I go to room 2, it will have its own messages. And the messages are not visible on the other room. So that hello is not the same hello. Maybe I should just say like room A, just to demonstrate the point. Okay. And if I go to room 2, that didn't show up. Okay, that's what I mean by isolated, which is what you want. So these are private rooms. The next step that we have is to configure the Rails part of Action Cable. So we already created the channel, as you saw, room channel. And as you can see, it's already gone stream for some channel. So how we actually configure this is, first of all, we're going to first take notice that you can do this. You can do stream for, and then you can enter some room here. So like room.first. So you can do this, and it'll always stream for this room. So anything that's subscribed. So when you're subscribed, so you're okay. Every time you load a page in Action Cable, you are going to be going through this action as well. And if you haven't rejected it, you will start streaming for the first room. So whether this works like right now, we can actually check that by going here. If I enter, we can actually see it's streaming for this room, but it's streaming for the first room. So how do we get this to stream for only the room that you're on? That's the question. And the way you can do that is, and I'm just going to copy the code and I'll just explain to you what it does. It's not complicated. Here it is. So this reject just says, unless params contains a room ID, do not even proceed. So right now this won't work because params I don't even think has a room ID. Yep, so as you can see, it's not streaming rooms. It doesn't have a room ID. I have to check now that I didn't customize my room. Okay, so where it's getting room ID from, I'm not sure. We'll figure that out later. But for now, we can also just do this ID because we'll know that, right? So only when the params ID exists, so like here we have 1, will it even attempt to. From that, it's going to find a room with that ID, and then it's going to stream for that room. So when I press enter here, or refresh here, sorry, go here. Let me just try and do that again. This should work. Okay, no. So these params are, I think, different than regular params. How long has this video been going for? 33 minutes? Okay. What if I do it from a different angle first? Okay, so we're going to get into the configuration at this stage. There is a bit of, it'll seem a little bit magical at the beginning, but that's because there's a few things that have to happen at once before this even begins working. So this is the sort of back-end part of it. And what this says is every single application or every single page that loads will come here and it'll decide whether it's going to subscribe to a room. So this is where that happens. It's within channels, room channel. So it'll subscribe, and if you have to clean it up in any way, that's where you'll do it here. Okay, and it'll probably run this automatically when you change tabs. Okay, I'm going to put in some code and we'll get back to why it works later, but we'll need this code for it to work at all, right? So what it says, I'll actually just explain it quickly. What it says is, unless within the params passed to this method, we have room ID, unless we have a room ID, reject it. Otherwise, we're going to find a room based on those params. So just remember Ruby syntax, that's like having parentheses around it. So we're going to find the room based on the ID here. We're going to I don't even think that's necessary, but we've done it in our past project, so we'll keep it. And then we're going to stream for that room. So that's similar to saying this, but it's actually like a shortcut. And because room is going to change depending on the room that we load, it needs to be stream for room. Whoops. Okay, the next thing that we want to change is the second thing that got generated when we created the channel, which is in JavaScript, channels, room channel. Okay. Whenever you load a page, this will reload. That's why we turned off turbo links, so that this reloads every single time you refresh the page. Okay. When you call consumer subscriptions create, this initiates the process. This here is your params. Like, this gets passed as params. So the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to change this into an object. Okay, I'm going to copy it from my last project because all the naming was the same, but I'll explain it. Okay, we're passing in an object right now. Oops. As you can see, and the object contains channel, so it needs to have a channel name under the string channel. Remember your notation. This is, I think, will this be JSON? No, just regular JavaScript object notation. And then here you would use room ID. Okay, room ID is, where is it getting that from? Where is it getting room ID from is the next question. And that's because I didn't explain it, but I got it from this. So I've just inserted this other piece of code that I used. Room ID is parseInt. So, okay, again, I'm going to call this one, and I'll just redo this introduction here. Okay, so let me just redo this one. Okay. So starting again. This right here is the default that gets generated when you've created a room channel. So this is the JavaScript that gets automatically generated. It may take a little bit of digging to realize that this room channel is actually well, it's not an object right now, but this is what gets passed as an object to this room channel action. So, not an action, it's to this subscribed action. So if we want to get this room ID param, we have to pass it in as an object here, and I'll show you how you do that. So first of all, I want you to realize that this is synonymous with doing this. So by default, when you just put room channel in, it takes it as channel is room channel. But you need to use this notation in order to add the second param that we'll need, which is param, and we'll need to tell it the room channel, because this is the only way that we can pass parameters to this method here. So because we're calling it from here, consumer subscriptions create, subscribed, this is where we need the room ID. So to do this, we go room ID, colon, and then we have to get the room ID with JavaScript somehow. The hacky solution that I used to get the room ID was this. I got first the URL from the page. So this lets the URL be the Windows location href. So this just gets it as a string. And then I go through that string, and I'll just copy it for brevity here. Okay. Bang. So room ID is parseInt. So this is converting all of this string into an int. So we actually didn't need, or maybe actually we might need that still, but we'll keep it like this. What it says is URL substring URL search for rooms / +6. So when you've got rooms / if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and start, and you get the substring that follows, you'll just be getting the number here. So that's sort of a hacky way of getting the room ID, passing into an int to make this a number. And then I can just put it here as a JavaScript variable, like that. And so now the object that I'm passing to the subscribed has room ID, which is the actual room ID as defined in the URL bar. Okay, there might be a much better way of doing that, but I did this just with the JavaScript. Okay, so now when we come here, we actually do have this room ID. Converting to 2i just to avoid any any mistakes, I suppose. Okay, there's one more thing I want to do. I don't want to do any of this stuff if we're on any other page than rooms / and then a number. So if I'm just on rooms, I don't even want to attempt to open up a WebSocket from here. I only want to open it up if I'm on something like rooms 1 or rooms 2. Now I want to open up a socket and for that room. So the workaround I did for that is this. If in that URL, index of rooms, so it's going to try and find where this substring begins. If it does not equal to -1, which means it actually found a real number where rooms / begins, then we'll do the rest of this code. If it returns -1, then that means that the URL does not contain rooms / and therefore we are in any other page and we don't want to do anything from that. Okay? So I realized that there might be a better way of doing this. This is just the way I did it in the past, and it works for now. And if you have any suggestions, please give them to me and I'll do an update at some point. But this works for now. Okay, so at this stage, let's see if this is actually working. So we refresh the page here. We go to our Rails server, and we can see that it is streaming from a particular room. And the only room that it could be streaming from is this one. Room, it's finding it by the room ID. So right now, the back end of the action cable is almost complete. There's only one more thing that we want to do is pass some useful information to it. Right? So that is, and this is the most finicky part of this whole process really. We'll be coming back to this JavaScript in a minute, but let's first look at what happens when we create a message model. So what we do is we can type hi here. That's supposed to press enter, but something I've done is screwed it up. You create the message, bang. It appears here. But why did it already appear? It already appeared because it refreshed the page, right? We don't want it to do that anymore. We want it to happen without refreshing the page. So in order to achieve this, there is a few sort of things that I did to work around it. And we'll just go through those. Okay. The first thing that we're going to do is change the action that occurs when we submit. So if we go to our controllers, where is that? It gets confusing. Controllers, message controllers, we're talking about the create action. This redirects. We don't want it to redirect anymore. You want it to just save. Okay. But we don't just want it to save, we actually want to, we will do something here. We want this to post this to the action cable. And so the way we do this, I'll just get it quickly from another project and I'll explain what it does. So controllers, room controller, controllers, okay. There we go. Okay, so it's room channel. So this is just default Rails. Room channel, broadcast to. You pick the room. So how do we know what room is in this method, you know? Because this is within the messages controller. So we need to define what room is. Room is at message.room. I think that would actually work just as is. We might not even have to do that. We could just go broadcast to message.room, because the message obviously belongs to a room. So that might work just as is. Cool. So when it saves, it's going to broadcast to. Now, if you were doing this and you really cared, you would put this as a job so that it works asynchronously, because you can have collisions when trying to insert things into a database or whatever. So you would put this as a job, but for my purposes, I'm just going to have this occur just instantly. So let's see what that actually looks like, or if you can actually even see that in the server, right? So I'm going to refresh the page. Everything's working as normal. Hello. Okay, create message. Okay, unknown format. I think it's something to do with the... Okay, I did not format that correctly. Let's go back and fix that. We don't need this here anymore. Let's retry that. Sorry about that one. Retry that. Nothing refreshes anymore. But if we look here, let's see if we can actually just read what that did briefly. It inserted it into messages, so it actually saved, and then it broadcasted it. You can see the room ID, you can see the content, and so even cooler than that is we can then try this. If I reload the page, okay, let me go to the JavaScript now, and you'll see it working. When it receives data, let's console.log the data. Right? So now I go here, I type hi. If we are subscribed to the room and it's all working, then this will pop something up right here. No. What happened? Okay, updated the room channel, it transmitted. We obviously were not subscribed then to the correct room. Or this is not working. So let's just do a little message here. Oops. Okay, when we refresh, we can see that it's subscribed to room 2. We type in a message, and there we go. So I don't know why it didn't work. Maybe I didn't refresh it correctly, but it is working now. It subscribes to room 2, and when data gets broadcast, it receives that in the feed. Okay. So it is working now from a backend standpoint. There is nothing else we really have to do here, except for updating the DOM. So that's pretty much the rest of this video, is making this work as we would expect it to work. Obviously making this button re-clickable again so that you can do it multiple times, and clearing this content out. So to do this really quickly, I'm going to go to packs, I'm going to add a new file, and I'm going to just message submit.js, and I'm going to copy much of the same code that I've already written because it's very simple. Here's what this code just says. So this is in JavaScript. This just says query the document for input name equals commit. So if I click on this object using Chrome Developer Tools here, message content, what does this say? Input, let's see if we can find, yeah, input type equals submit, name equals commit. So another way of just showing you what I'm actually doing is if I collect this and paste it into this, paste it into my Developer Tools console, you can see that what is getting highlighted here is this input. So it knows what I'm talking about, right? I'm adding an event listener, which is that whenever this gets clicked, it's going to set a timeout to make it asynchronous. I found that was necessary. So just 100 millisecond wait before it resets the submit button. It's going to query again, and it's going to select, this time, the message content. So it selects this message content, and it sets the value equal to nothing. Lastly, it goes back, queries again for this, and it turns it back on by setting disabled to false. So this is DOM manipulation to allow me to submit once again. So how do I add this JavaScript to the page that I have loaded here? Well, let me just make sure. I'm pretty sure you just do it through the view, but let me just do it exactly as I did it in this project right here. So I would go to use rooms. Cool. So the way to do it that's sort of Heroku friendly and sort of publish friendly is you'll use the Rails JavaScript pack tag notation. The way I'll do that is I'll go to let me close all of these, app, views, rooms, show, and I'll post underneath everything so that all of these have rendered before I even begin to call this JavaScript, and I'll save that. So now, when I refresh this page, Webpacker will need to refresh, which is why it takes so long. Webpacker has to do its thing. Now I type hi. I don't know why that's happening, but I hit the button, boom, it clears this, and it also clicked the submit button. So if we go to inspect, it got that object. So now I can say action cable working on backend, and it is. So I hit it, it receives all of the content just for room 2 and clears this, which is what you would want it to do. Now it's not focusing on this as it should. So I don't know exactly why it's not doing that. I'm pretty sure you can use the autofocus tag. I'll fix that up in a second, but this is working. So right now I'm going to just close this, git add, git commit. So created action cable backend. Push it, clear it. Now we'll just start the server again. All right. Okay, so this has been longer than it should have taken. This is like taking me 50 minutes from the beginning to get to this point, but we're close. We're really close now. Okay, so what have we accomplished up to this point? The backend's complete. We have rooms that are private, they're separated. When we input content into this, we can submit. It clears the field, it submits, and we can see that we are subscribed to the correct room. All of this stuff is pretty much backend except for this small bit of JavaScript we did here and the small bit of JavaScript we did here in order to clear that form. But pretty much everything else has been just backend stuff. Okay, the small little bit that's left of this project is to now update this with the JavaScript that is incoming. So obviously when I refresh, it actually does these things, but so like just a demonstration, hello, I type hello, right? It goes here, we can see that the data did go through, but it's not updating here, okay? The reason it's not updating here is because Rails is not going to automatically re-render the page. That would be refreshing, right? We don't want it to refresh. We want to do this just via DOM manipulation. So again, this is where you can do this so many ways, but just the bare bones way of doing it that I did it was we'd just go to the views. Sorry, we don't even need to go to the views. We go to our last project that did it, just to save us a little bit of time. What we're going to go to, okay, so where we're actually going to be doing our work now is within the channels room. So this is where we're console logging that data. But instead of console logging it, we want to update something in the DOM. So, this is actually pretty simple. So, first of all, what is the element that encompasses or sort of wraps all of these? Is there one? These are all P tags. Okay, so these aren't even in tags, right? That's lazy. So we need to make a few modifications here to get this to work. So to do this, first of all, let's go to app views, rooms, show, and we can go to our, wherever we're looping through it. Here we are. So we're just putting the message content, but first, I think I'm going to do this. I'll do it as an unordered list, and I'll do an ID of messages so that I can access it really quickly later as an ID. Close that. And then within each of these, obviously you need to wrap it as a list item. And so if we refresh this, it'll now appear all dot pointed. That's pretty ugly. That's really ugly. So how am I going to fix that? I think for now, actually, what I'll do is I'll just go Rails console message dot delete all, just to get rid of them. And I'll leave the styling up to you, pretty much. Okay. Now I refresh this page. They're all gone. I go hi. Nothing happens because it went to action cable. So it's subscribed, the data. Okay, you know what's happening. Refresh, and there it is. Cool. I think it's the break statement, actually, that was causing it to be like that. So we could have avoided that big refresh, but whatever. Okay, now at this point, we know that everything is happening within an element called UL, or an element with the ID of messages. So I can go here and I can say document dot query selector. Okay. I can go UL messages. To test that this is like working, we can just grab that, go to our inspect console, paste it in there, and you can see that it indeed gets that. And note that it's highlighting the UL, it's not highlighting an individual list item, but the container around it. Okay. So we can, now that we have that, we can go and use another like special command. And let me just make sure that I get it correct. Oh, it's in channels, room channel. Okay. So I'm going to use the method insert, and there are a million ways to do this. Insert adjacent, but I'll just insert adjacent HTML. Okay. 2 arguments get put into this, 2 arguments. The first one is like where you want to put it. So I'm going to use beforehand here. And now I actually put the string content that I want to get rendered as HTML underneath this. So we know that that should start and end with the list item tags. Okay. So whenever data gets sent here, it's going to re-render and append before the end of this container. And we want to put the data, essentially. The only thing that we're doing here is rendering just message content. So to do that is actually quite easy. That's why I kept it really simple, because this is stuff that you'll do when you pick up this project. So how I can do that, first of all, I have to change this type of string to using the, what would you call that? The small apostrophe-like quotation mark. I'm not sure what you actually call that, but it's the one at the top left of the keyboard, and that allows you to do string interpolation. So I can enter in data. This will be very ugly when we do it. So we'll let Webpacker re-render, then or refresh, and then if I type hi, and I actually enter, we're getting an object because we haven't dereferenced it. So to dereference it, you use okay, so you can actually just dereference it like anything else. I just have to go, I'll get rid of this console log now, and I'll just use data.content. So the naming convention for data follows that of the model. So however you named it in the model, which we named it content, and that's how we're going to access it here. So when I refresh, let Webpacker do its thing. And when I hit submit, bang, hello there. Now this, for some reason, did not, it went before this one. Okay. So before end is what I used. Where should it go? Why are you going there? Let's see. It's going as the second element. It's almost as though these things are not going within the correct division. Okay. Insert adjacent. Insert adjacent. What if I did after end? Well, it's not giving me any. I'm not sure if that's even correct. No, now it's not even going in the right spot. This is what happens when you stray from the formula. Before and if we go to the show UL, I don't see why. Insert adjacent HTML. Okay, so I'm seeing something's up. Each one of these messages is re-rendering its own UL. So the query selector here is actually just finding the first UL. So that's our mistake. And the rookie mistake is we put the UL inside the loop. Damn. That was silly. Silly. Okay. Tab all of that. Then put this here. I'm like half asleep. That was such a stupid error. Okay, and so now it works, doesn't it? Yeah. Cool. So that's the front end part of Action Cable, pretty much complete. Okay. So what have we done? We've created the backend, we've created the basic room model. The only thing I would fix now is the fact that I can't hit enter here and have that work. I don't know if that's because I have set this as a text, if like the type of field that I'm using here is different. Like maybe because it's a text area instead of just a field. Let's see if that doesn't make a difference. Oh, I didn't. I have to restart the server. Because that's kind of annoying, isn't it? If you had to keep clicking. Okay, field doesn't exist. Maybe I should just do text field. Does that exist? Yep. Okay. Yes. Okay, so beautiful. Now it's working as intended. So if you put it as a text area, then an enter will actually get interpreted as an enter. Of course, in here, if you wanted to do an enter, you can just put shift enter. Oh, no, you can't. Well, you'll have to write some probably custom JavaScript code then to make it work, but that's a little bug fix there. So now it's working pretty much as expected.
All right, cool. Hopefully that was exactly what you needed, or you could find what you needed within that video. If you want a more tidy and concise explanation of how Action Cable works, I'll be making a video on that and releasing it shortly. So hopefully this was helpful to you. Thanks for watching.